And as I mentioned at the start, I'm going to tell you about the scoring process enhancement that's happening to two PT speaking tasks, describe, image, and retell lecture, but more on that a little bit later. So let's start by talking about read aloud, just briefly, okay? So this is what read aloud looks like on test day. I'm sure you've seen it. And here's what happens. So you're going to see a paragraph of text. The text will be up to 60 words in length, up to, it may be shorter than that. You'll have 30 to 40 seconds to rehearse. Now, why 30 to 40 seconds? Because it depends on the length of the paragraph. Shorter paragraphs have less time, longer paragraphs have more time. The microphone will then open and start recording you, and for the same amount of time that you rehearse for, 30 or 40 seconds. You read the paragraph aloud, you're scored on content, pronunciation, and oral fluency, and you're going to get 6 or 7 of these question types on test day in a row, okay? Now, each of your read aloud responses will be sent to an AI to be automatically or machine scored. So you get a score of 0 to 5 for content, oral fluency, and pronunciation. And if there's anything unusual that stops the AI from being able to score your response, a human's going to step in to review it. What do I mean by that? So a human might check or review your response if the AI scoring system can't figure out how to score it. So this usually happens because what you said doesn't fit with how the system has learned to assess you. So the system flags it and sends it to a human to listen to. This could happen for a few reasons. Number one, your response isn't clear. Maybe the microphone didn't pick up your voice properly, or there was too much background noise, or maybe you just didn't say anything at all. Or number two, it might be irrelevant. You might be speaking off topic, like if you start talking about the weather or say something different to what's on the screen. Or three, you're completely unintelligible. Maybe for some reason you decide to read aloud in your mother tongue, which is probably not a good idea. But that's one of the reasons why it might get flagged. But there are plenty of other reasons your response could get flagged for review. But honestly, nothing to really worry about here. As long as you read that text in front of you on the screen, all good. Okay, so what's the best approach to read aloud on test day? And what do I mean by approach? What I mean by approach is your mindset, your strategy, and again, what you believe about how it's scored. This is important to get a good score. So I believe the best approach to performing well on the read aloud question is to read aloud like a newsreader. Newsreaders are fantastic at reading aloud because they're trained to speak clearly. They keep a steady pace. They use just the right tone and intonation, and they make sure that their delivery is accurate, smooth, and easy to follow. And if you're not familiar with how, say, an English speaker newsreader reads the news aloud, just go to YouTube. I'm sure you've seen that. But pay attention to their delivery, their execution. They're excellent. This is sort of how you should approach this task on test day. I think it's simple, should be simple. Okay, that's straightforward. That was read aloud. Let's talk about repeat sentence, which is the second PT speaking task. And let's also think about an approach to this question type as well. This is what the question type looks like on test day. And this is what happens. You hear a single sentence. It'll go for between 3 and 9 seconds. So, some sentences are shorter than other sentences. The microphone will then open and you repeat back exactly what was said. You're scored on content, pronunciation, and oral fluency, and you're going to get 10 to 12 of these on test day. And all of your repeat sentences will be sent to an AI to be automatically scored or machine scored. So you'll get a score of 0 to 5 for oral fluency and pronunciation, and you'll get a score of 0 to 3 for content, depending on how much of the original sentence you were able to repeat back. And just like read aloud, if there's anything unusual that stops the AI from scoring your responses, a human will step in to review them. Again, there are 3 main reasons why a human might check or review your repeat sentences, and that's because the AI finds your response unclear, irrelevant, or unintelligible. So what's the best approach to repeating sentences or repeat sentence on test day? Well, I think it's like this. The key is to firstly relax and then let the sentence really sink in. Again, it's only a pretty short sentence. So I think a lot of people focus too much on the speaking side of this task, but you do really, a lot of it depends, your speaking performance depends on how well you listen and you let that sentence sink in. So relax and absorb the sentence. I think that's probably the first, or let's say the second step after relaxing. And also, when you repeat the sentence back, you repeat it exactly as you heard it or exactly as it was said. And don't stress about the accent. It's not about trying to mimic pronunciation or anything like that. It's all about understanding and repeating the words as clearly and as accurately as possible. Now, again, I'm trying to challenge your beliefs and assumptions here about automated scoring. So what's a good approach to thinking about automated scoring? You know, on test day, how do we think about it? Well, when we think about the best approach to each and every PT speaking task, including repeat sentence, I think it's helpful to understand that the automated scoring system was trained on hundreds of thousands of human responses that were graded by human speaking examiners. So I think the approach here, or the trick, if you want to call it a trick, is to think, I'm not actually speaking to an AI or an algorithm. I'm speaking to a person, and that's going to help your performance a lot, because I don't think we really know, well, unless you use conversational AI a lot, but I don't think we really know how to speak to AI and conversational AI. Think about it like speaking to a person, because that's how this system was built and that's how it was trained. And I think that will alleviate a lot of your stress leading up to test day as well. So yeah, as I said, that's how the AI was trained, and that's pretty much how it scores you, as a human would score you. And keep this in mind. I think it'll make you relax and focus on your delivery and clarity, as if you're speaking to a person, not a robot. Okay, let's take a closer look at describe image, because as I said at the beginning, there is a scoring process enhancement that's taking place for this particular task. One thing I really want to stress is this task is not changing at all, right? The task is exactly the same. And the scoring criteria, how you're scored, is exactly the same as well. Okay, so there's really no changes to this whatsoever. There's a minor enhancement, which I'll explain now. Okay, so this is what describe image looks like. Again, no changes whatsoever to the question type. And this is what happens, no changes here. You'll see an image on the screen. It's going to be a line graph or a bar chart or something similar. You'll have 25 seconds to analyze and understand the image. After that, the microphone will turn on or open, and then you have 40 seconds to describe the image as best as you can. And it doesn't need to be perfect, just a clear description of what's happening in the image. You don't need to get all the points of the image. And you'll be scored on content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. And you can expect 3 or 4 of these questions on test day. Again, no changes to this task whatsoever. It's exactly the same. Okay, this is what's changing. So this is the old scoring process for describe image, where an AI will score you on content, pronunciation, oral fluency from 0 to 5, and only if something unusual happens will a human step in to provide your final score. Again, this is the old scoring process, and this has changed since November the 4th. So this is the new scoring process for describe image. And listen carefully, not that much has changed and not that it's really that important, but the AI will score you from 0 to 5 for pronunciation, oral fluency, and content, as it always has. Now, this is where there's been an enhancement to the scoring process. Previously, a human would only step in if something's anomalous or unusual, but now a human will be checking every describe image for content and giving it a score in addition to the AI score from 0 to 5. Again, in the new scoring process, a human will be checking every single describe image response and giving it a score for content only from 0 to 5. So the human won't be scoring your pronunciation or oral fluency. The AI still does that. So it's just a small check that takes place for content. Here's a sort of simpler way to look at it. The AI still scores you on pronunciation, oral fluency, and content, but now a human double checks the content of each of your responses before you get your final score. So that is it. And, you know, it really shouldn't affect anything for test day for you, okay? Now, it does beg the question, however, what happens if the machine and the human give two different content scores? Okay, let's think through this. So in this first scenario, let's look at the top image there. Both the AI and the human give you a score of 4 for content. So your final score for content is going to be 4. In other words, they both agree that it's 4, so it's 4. Now let's look at a disagreement scenario. Let's say the AI flags your response as a memorized template and gives you a score of 0, but the human thinks, it's sort of somewhat original, even though it's off topic, so you'll get a score of 1. In cases like this, where there's a disagreement or a difference in scores, a second human reviewer will step in. And in this case, the second reviewer agrees with the AI that it's a memorized template, say, for example, so you end up with a score of 0. Now, using templates in PT is not a good idea because Pearson has a pretty sophisticated system in place to detect them. And it works in two main ways. And I should say this has been happening since day dot. So first, Pearson monitors online spaces like Facebook groups and message boards and YouTube videos. And what happens is web crawlers are searching for new templates that are being shared. So if a test taker thinks they found a sort of secret template, you can sort of, Pearson's already got it, okay? Number 2, Pearson regularly analyzes large numbers of responses and compares them to each other to spot highly similar or identical patterns. So for example, if a certain pattern of phrases or sentences is being said repeatedly, it raises a red flag. And if those phrases or sentences can be traced back to a template, it gets added to Pearson's repository and flagged in future tests. So that's how that works. Let's do something a little bit more fun. Let's switch gears now. I want you to play the role of the human examiner here, and we're going to play a little game. I'm going to give you some responses, and what I want you to do is think about what score you would give me for content. Don't worry about my pronunciation or fluency. Think about content here, considering everything that I've just told you. So think about whether what I'm saying is completely irrelevant or completely unoriginal. And again, you'll need to give me, if it is completely irrelevant or unoriginal, give me a 0 for content. Ready? I'll describe the image. You tell me my content score. I'm looking at the graph in front of me. The graph is very beautiful. The graph has different colors. I can see blue, red, and green colors. There's a light blue background. Maybe it's gray. There are some lines. The lines go up, the lines go down. There are also numbers, 1900, 1940, 1970, 2010. I think the graph is very nice. It looks good. The graph is interesting. So, what score would you give me for content, considering that what we're really looking for is a description of the data within the image, the trends, the movement, not what the image looks like? So hopefully you gave me a score of 0, because what would happen is the AI and the human would give it a score for 0 for being off topic or completely irrelevant. So my overall score, my total score for this question would also be 0, because if your content score is 0, then everything becomes 0. So this is a total waste of a fabulous opportunity to give a really good response and get some score points. It doesn't need to be perfect. Remember that. It doesn't need to be perfect. Let's do another one. Ready? Again, I'm going to describe the image. You give me a score from 0 to 5 for content. Think about whether I'm on topic and whether I'm using my own words. Ready? The graph illustrates the trends in accent over 110 years. The graph shows a significant increase from 1900 to 2010, reaching its peak at 2010. Conversely, there was a noticeable decline from 1900 to 2010. The data also shows a moderate fluctuation between 1940 and 1970. Overall, the graph demonstrates the changing patterns of accents over the given time frame. What score would you give me for content for that response? Well, here's the transcript of everything I just said, and it looks pretty good. What do you think? You might be surprised to learn that this response would actually score a 0, not just for content, but for everything. Why? because it's a memorized template. And I found this one online. And if I found it online, you can bet that Pearson's crawlers have already picked it up too. So even if my pronunciation and oral fluency were perfect, I'd still get a 0 because the response isn't original. It wasn't my own words. And again, that's a huge waste of an opportunity to get score points for speaking. And I'm sure you will be able to do great on this. So again, every response is now scored by both an AI and a human for content. And yes, that was a template response, so they would have given me a 0. Let's do one more, okay? Let's do one more. Okay, the graph shows the frequency of 2 regional accents that are spoken on a particular island, and it lists the number of speakers for every 105 people. It includes lowland accents and highland accents. What we can see is that highland accents have increased exponentially over the years from 1900 to 2010, whereas lowland accents have conversely decreased quite significantly. And in fact, by 2010, there are very few speakers of lowland accents and lots more speakers of highland accents. I'm not sure how long I took to speak then. I'm not sure if it was 40 seconds, but that was a spontaneous, relevant, original response. I used my own words. It wasn't perfect. You could hear me sort of stuttering and stammering a little bit. But what I did was I described the trends or the data within the graph. That would have given me a score of, I suspect, a score of 5. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm just describing the image as I see it in my own words. I'm sure you can do that. Cool. So what's the best approach to describe image on test day? Because we need a sort of anxiety-free approach, okay? So I think you should just give an original, relevant response, and this will maximize your chances of getting a score of 5 for content. Quite simply, describe what you see in your own words and avoid using any sort of memorized responses. It's a really bad idea. Plus, I don't have to burden my memory with trying to memorize any of this stuff. I can just describe what's in front of me. Again, I'm sure you can do that. Now, it's important to understand that structures and templates are very different things. You can and definitely should, I highly encourage you to use a simple structure for describe image, where you will give an introductory sentence, which is usually, say, the graph title. You describe the main parts of the image, you know, the highest points, the lowest points, the most salient, interesting points, and then just give a concluding sentence and do all this in under 40 seconds. This isn't a template response. Using a structure is a smart way to structure what you're saying, and I highly recommend practicing with a simple structure on test day. So that is that. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. Now let's turn our attention to retail lecture. And everything I told you about the scoring enhancement process for describe image also applies here for retail lecture. So let's go through this and take a closer look. So here's what retail lecture looks like on test day. You see an image, you hear a lecture, and this is what happens. So as I said, you see an image related to the lecture. You see, sometimes, you will definitely hear a lecture. Sometimes you see a lecture as well. It might be a video. It can go for up to 90 seconds. And during this time, you should be taking notes. When the lecture finishes, you'll have 10 seconds to prepare. Prepare to speak, that is. Prepare to retell the lecture. Then you retell the lecture for up to 40 seconds. You don't have to speak all the way to 40 seconds. You're scored on content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. And you'll get 1 or 2 of these on test day. So this is the new scoring process for retail lecture, where the AI will still score you from 0 to 5 for pronunciation, oral fluency, and content, as it always has. But just like describe image, a human will be double checking your content and giving it a score from 0 to 5 in addition to the AI score. So again, the scoring process enhancement that takes place for describe image is exactly the same here for retail lecture as well. So just to be clear, the human won't be scoring your pronunciation or oral fluency. That's still the job of the AI. So it's just a small check that takes place for content, double checking of the content by the person. What is the best approach to retell lecture? And I think probably the best approach is a simple approach. So, really, if you retell what you heard in your own words, then you maximize your chances of getting a score of 5 for content and possibly a perfect score for the entire question, a full 15 marks. But if you speak off topic or use memorized responses, then you'll get a score of 0 for everything. So again, the approach is simple. Retell what you heard in your own words. Use your notes to guide you. It doesn't need to be perfect. You do not need to pick up every single point of the lecture. I think that would almost be impossible to do. It's just about picking out the main points, putting them into, again, a structure is really good for this, and retelling the lecture in your own words. Cool. Last one. So let's think about a best approach to, whoops, my camera has died here. What's going on? 1 second. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to put you on mute. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. My camera decided to turn off by itself. Little technical glitch. Okay, back to this one here. I think you can all hear me. Let me just double check my audio. Cool. Okay, last one. Let's think about a best approach to answer short question. So here's what it looks like on test day. And here's what happens. You hear a question, pretty straightforward question. The microphone opens, you answer the question, you're scored on vocabulary. So not content, pronunciation, and oral fluency this time, just vocabulary. And you'll get 5 or 6 of these on test day. And the best approach to this particular question type is, well, answer the question exactly as you would in real life. Just listen carefully and give a response in a single word or a short phrase. Keep it short and sweet. You don't need to answer in a full sentence. Okay, cool. Let's recap. And I've realized I've sort of flown through this, but that's good. You'll be off the hook in about 5 minutes. So let's summarize. So nothing's changed with the questions or the scoring for really any of the tasks, but there has been a scoring process enhancement for describe, image, and retell lecture. Just to recap that again, in the past, in the old scoring process, pre-November 4th, a human would only check your describe, image, and retell lecture responses for content if they were anomalous or unusual. But now, from November the 4th, a human will check every response for content for describe, image, and retell lecture. I think I've done that to death. One more slide. So these two tasks are still scored exactly the same, and there's no change to the tasks themselves, but humans will be double checking content for relevance and originality. Okay, let's recap the best approaches to each of the PT speaking tasks one by one. So for read aloud, relax, read like a newsreader. I think they are exemplary at this, and I think you can do that. Repeat sentence, relax, listen carefully, absorb that sentence, repeat it back. Describe image, describe what you see in your own words. Retell lecture, retell what you heard in your own words. And so say answer short question there. Answer short question, keep it short and sweet. Answer the question, short and sweet. Cool, that is it, my friends. So if you want to learn more about the describe, image, and retell lecture scoring enhancements, there's a QR code on the screen. It'll take you across to the Pearson PT website where you can read. There's also some frequently asked questions there which you might be interested in. But I really strongly, my camera just died again, so I'm going to have to end on this screen, I'm afraid. I really encourage you to read through that carefully. I really also encourage you to use trusted sources like Pearson PT to get your information about this. It's not really a big change at all. It may mean that you need to change your approach a little bit, but I think we've gone through this today, and I think you're going to do great on test day. I would love to look you in the eye and bid you farewell, but my camera's just died again. So I will sign off from here. Cool. Thanks very much for attending. I appreciate it. And best of luck on test day. I think you'll do great.
Re-